Okay. All right, we got all these contraptions working now. All right, Psalms 119. Psalms 119. I still have to invite you in, evidently individually. And I don't know why that is, but I don't care. The point is I got to remember that. Sharon, how you getting along in that heat up there?
Oh, it's kind of warm.
Yeah, I know.
I was tired this morning.
I'll bet you were. I'll bet you were. How many hours? 12?
Yeah?
Oh, goodness. Boy, I know what that's like. Okay. Psalms 119. We started with 137 through 144. Okay. Richard, open up in prayer for us, would you? Thank you. Okay, Psalms 119. We know the emphasis is on a righteous God and his upright judgments, and that his word is also righteous, and the testimony, the righteousness of his testimony is everlasting. So in this section, the emphasis is on the righteousness of God, a righteous God. Now, I think we went through 137. Upright are thy judgments or ordinances. And we have two main senses: the act of hearing or setting as a judge, or sitting as a judge, and hearing a case rendered with proper verdict. And we looked at that. And then we looked at what upright is. And the idea of upright is to be straight. So we looked at that together. The sense of being on the level. And that is with God's standard. All right. Verse 138. Thy testimonies that thou hast commanded are righteous and very faithful. Now we see in verse 1 the relationship and spiritual characteristic with God. The next verse is the same with the Word. 119 challenges us to have a right relationship with God and a right relationship with the Word. And here they're side by side. It makes it very easy to see. Thy testimonies that thou hast commanded are righteous and very faithful. Now, testimonies is a solemn charge or duty as on the tablets, as existing as a reminder to Israel. And Israel's relationship and responsibility to God. That's what testimonies are, and that's how they're supposed to work. So you see this idea of testimonies being commanded. All right, you can see how that goes together. So look in Exodus 31. Exodus 31. Exodus 31, and look with me in verse 18. In this section also is the idea of Sabbath and how it was a sign between God and Israel. Now verse 18, and he gave unto Moses, when he had ceased speaking with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of testimony. Tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. That idea of testimony, you can see there how the law is the testimony of God. It's his solemn divine charge or duty. All right. Look in Exodus chapter 20 and in verse 4, please. Exodus chapter 20 and in verse 4. We'll start in 20 verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, and then you have what we know as the Decalogue, deca meaning 10, log meaning that which is written, and we know really that that's 10 words, and it was written on stone. It's called the testimony of God. All right, and then in the book of Exodus chapter 25, we can see it in a different way, more so to the person of God. Look in Exodus chapter 25. Exodus 25, verse 8. Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. 25:9 of Exodus. According to all that I will show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, the pattern of all the furnishings. And notice further, if you will, in verse 11, thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, within without shalt thou overlay it, and shalt make upon it a rim of gold and round about it. And we find that all of these measurements and all that has to do with this ark, notice in verse 21, and thou shalt put the mercy seat, that lid that went on top of the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the what? Testimony that I shall give thee. Now in other places it's called the ark of the testimony. The ark of the testimony. That's the word that he's using here. It can also refer to the activity of someone, here in this case, Israel. Look in Psalms 122. Psalms 122, verse 4. Whether the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, unto the testimony of Israel, to give thanks unto the name of the Lord. So this idea of testimony is here referring to the tabernacle. So the word can be used in the sense of a place where one is keeping these solemn charges or duties. It can refer to specific things like the Decalogue, like the Ark of the Covenant, the Table of Testimony. Now here it's being used toward the Word of God itself. And here notice, thy testimonies that thou hast commanded are righteous and very faithful. Now we've already dealt with the word righteous. I think we made an extensive study of that as an attribute of God and in reference to character and how we as God's followers are to follow him righteously, upright, and so forth. So we'll deal with this idea of faithful. Really, like in the New Testament, Hebrews, a little bit the same. The faithful is reliable. Now, when I was a supervisor, there were people who were faithful to the job, but they weren't reliable. In other words, they faithfully showed up and faithfully got a check. But when it came to the responsibilities of the job, well, be sure you check on those, okay? You know, and they used to get mad at me and I said, oh, you just don't trust us. And I said, trust but verify. So I'm going to trust you're going to do it. I'm going to verify that you did do it. Then I'll really, really trust you. Huh? All right, so that didn't go over well. But anyhow, sometimes when we think about faithful, we think of attendance. We think of someone's presence there. That's part of it. That's part of it, but that's not the meaning of this word. You would fall short. It's reliable. Reliable. In other words, it's not only there and present, but you can count on it. You can count on it. It's reliable. Look in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32. Deuteronomy chapter 32. And let's look in verse 4. Deuteronomy 32:4. He is the rock, capital R. We have this proper name both in the New and Old Testament. His work is perfect, for all his ways are justice, a God of truth without iniquity, just and right is he. Now, let's look here for a minute. Look in verse 18. Moses is kind of writing up Israel. He knew them. And notice in verse 18, of the rock who begot thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten God who formed thee. And when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very perverse generation, children in whom is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities. I will move them to jealousy with those who are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. Okay, you see this idea of jealousy. All right, and over in the book of Exodus, it's a proper name of God. His name is jealous. And the reason that is because even though Israel doesn't keep their end of the covenant, and become even to apostasy, how God gave the covenant and how he meant it to be kept remains the same. Reliable. Reliable. I was having a discussion with somebody the other day. I think it was one of the Uber techs. They all know me by name now. I called him and we had a little discussion. And something happened with they weren't paying me. And I knew better, because you can play around with it and you'll see they've got everything listed. So they've got it there. They just weren't showing it. And really I called on them because I said, look, when you do this and these guys see it, they quit driving. And then it gets a little hairy out here. And I said, I'm getting 3 and 4 deep now, so I know what's going on. I know how those guys are, you know. And I said, I know you've got them all listed. I know you do. And we got into discussion. And I said, you know, you guys and your IT, I said, I'll tell you what I don't like about it. It's not reliable. I said, that's what drives me nuts. And I said, I go out to my Ford truck. I never think twice whether that baby's going to start up and run. Unless I've done something really stupid, like leave the lights on, etc. Otherwise, I don't even think twice. But boy, when it comes to you guys' app, it's nervous business. every time I try to turn the thing on. I said, it's not reliable. That's the problem. Unreliable. It's present, but it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, okay? So that's what we mean by faithful here. He's not only always present, yes, he is, but he is also reliable in all of his character. He changes not. His compassions fail not. Great is thy faithfulness. You know that song? And so when you think of reliability, think of that. Let's look in the book of Isaiah 11:5. Oh, wait a minute. Let me make it easier on you. Let's go to Psalms 33:4. I got several passages here. Psalms 33:4. Because I want you to appreciate what these testimonies are. Now, the reliable God has given us a reliable word. The problem is not the Word of God. It's reliable. The problem is man. That's the problem. Man and his sin nature. And notice, if you will, in 33:4, for the word of the Lord is right, and all his works are done in truth. He loveth righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. I remember when I was taking a physics course up at OSU, and me and this professor, I sat in the front row because I'll tell you, I didn't get things the first time. And when he would teach in the class and he taught something new, he'd say, okay, everybody got that? And he'd say, okay, Ted, did you get that? And we had fun, though. It was fun. I appreciate it. I always told my professors, I've paid some money for this course. I ain't leaving until I get it. You might be here a while. But anyway, we began to talk about distance to planets and absolute positioning and how that could be calculated down to the very millionth whatever. And I said, that's magnificent. I said, but how's come, if you could just tell me, how's come it is that it's always that way? Because things are always evolving and changing according to you guys, and there's no absolutes. But yet you're telling me that if I put this scope in the I can see Mars at this point exactly every time. Well, that caused quite a problem. And I said, so the universe is absolute. And oh boy, if it's not, we're going to have grave trouble here. Right? Those are pretty powerful stars, those planets. And they don't dare not do what they're supposed to do the way they're supposed to do it, or we have trouble here. It's all over. And I said, that's amazing. That's amazing. Can I ask you, what keeps it all in place? Something's got to be keeping that all in place. He knew what I was getting to. And he gave me his finger. Now, Ted, I said, okay, just asking. I said, just asking. Do you have an answer? And he says, well, Ted, why don't you graduate and get your PhD and you be the guy to answer it? And I said, we can skip all that. I got the answer. And then he said, well, I walked right into that, didn't I? Oh, I said, you did. By him were all things created, for him, and by him, and he maintains all things. I'll take my PhD right here. Put her right there. And I said, God demonstrates that he is reliable. He changes not. And friends, that's what I'm trying to show you. And that's the power of the statement. It is reliable. It's reliable. Scientists have even changed a little bit when they found out that this wasn't the only galaxy. They found out there's galaxies beyond the galaxy, and they're finding out they can't get to it. It's infinite. Uh-oh. Oh, well, see, God knew that the whole time. He put that in His Word ages ago, that it's that way. Let's look in the book of Proverbs, chapter 28, and in verse 20. Proverbs 28, verse 20. Now we're going to kind of go from the universe down to dust, man. And notice, if you will, in 28 and in verse 20, a faithful man shall abound with blessings, but he that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. This is the same book that says, faithful men are few and far between. Reliable. Let's look in the book of Isaiah 11, verse 5. Isaiah 11, verse 5. You know, this is something, this day and age, that I'm seeing now more and more, is things are not reliable. Isn't it interesting? The more sophisticated we get, the less reliable things are. Right?
Yep, every device.
So, yeah, huh?
I think every device will be a new line come out for it.
Yeah, I heard about the Kenworth thing. Yeah, it's amazing. They got all them trucks sitting out there and all those. Did somebody from here tell me that? Leona did. Okay, I couldn't remember who told me. And there they sit because they can't get people to work. Now, on a more rude level, the other night, kind of got in a jam time-wise, and I'm trying to eat at home more and eat out less. That's a good idea for health and economy, by the way. And I had not eaten in some time, and for me, that's not good. So I went to the Wendy's on here, Henderson. One car there. I thought, he's going to have to make the hamburger, take the order. This might be in a minute. Well, we can't serve you. I said, well, it's not after 1. Nobody's here. I'll send you to the Wendy's on Bethel. It's like one more exit up. I thought, I better eat before I can't eat anything. Everything closes down. We got to eat at the gas station. That's never good. So I went up there. Oh, no, we don't know. No, we can't serve you. There's several Wendy's up in that area. Finally, I got the one right there in Dublin. The Wendy's headquarters is across from it. And I thought, boy, if they're not open, we're going to resurrect Dave Thomas from the grave. This is enough of this. And so one guy there, and he says, it's going to be a minute. And I got another call, and I said, you know what? Forget it. I can't rely on Wendy's anymore. It's heartbreak. My favorite's number 8, by the way. I like that sandwich. But anyhow, I couldn't get my number 8, and I thought, that'll teach you. That'll teach you to eat before you leave the house. I spent more time running around. I could have made 3 meals and ate it. But I was up too far. So, lo and behold, earlier that morning, I had one of these pre-registered rides. I know this is getting involved, and if it wasn't the manager of the Wendy's in Hilliard, and I said, okay, buddy, I want to talk to you. We're going to take our time getting to work this morning. I said, I went to this Wendy's and the headquarters Wendy's. I could not get my number 8 burger. Not happy. I'm not happy with you. And he says, buddy, I'll tell you, we can't get anybody reliable. We can't get closers. They're not reliable. unreliable. Can't count on it. Now, it used to be, you go to Wendy's up to 1 o'clock, you got what you wanted. Hopefully. But you know. So you see, the restaurant's there in presence, but the service was not reliable. That's what I'm trying to show you. This word is reliable, just as we're seeing it in these passages. Now, Isaiah 11, verse 5, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness, the girdle of his waist. Now, having had some training in weights and so forth, and that is the first place you start. It's the midsection, because I'll tell you what, if that's not strong, you're going to have trouble with the rest of it. So that's where that's kind of where we're at. And in this idea of faithfulness is reliable. Reliable. And faithfulness, the girdle of his waist. So that's where all the strength comes from in the human body. It's right here in the midsection. Right? If you're in shape, you don't need as much stuff to push around on to get around, because the midsection's there. It'll just pick you right up. And that's the idea here in this passage. Look in the book of Hosea, chapter 2, verse 19. And may I say that God's reliability does not alter, even no matter what man does or what anything else does. It doesn't alter, because he can't change. So look in Hosea chapter 2 and in verse 19. This is kind of the hinge of the book. This is this book relates God's relationship with Israel like the betrothed bride. And in chapter 2, verse 19, and I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness, in justice, in loving kindness, in mercies. I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know the Lord. Do you see that? In faithfulness, thou shalt know the Lord. Okay, the Word of God, those testimonies he commanded, they are reliable, forever reliable. Okay, let's go back to our psalm, Psalms 119. My zeal hath consumed me, because mine enemies have forgotten thy words. This is one of those verses where, to get the sense of it, it's easier to flip it. Okay? It makes better sense. You know, that verse in the book of John. And because he first loved us, we love him. And then you have the right perspective. That's this verse here. It's really better to say, because mine enemies have forgotten thy words, my zeal hath consumed me. Does that ring better to you? I hope it does. Because he first loved us, we love him. Right? All right. Same here. Because mine enemies have forgotten thy words, my zeal hath consumed me. This is the effect of the forgotten word on the writer. My zeal hath consumed me. Now, zeal is equal to the word jealousy. it really means fervency. It means on fire. I once had it explained this way, and I remember when Moses met me in Swaziland once, and we were eating out on the terrace because he just couldn't stand air conditioning. We had problems with that when we were riding along sometimes. He just would freeze. He just couldn't stand. He didn't grow up with it. He didn't like it. Even at the university, the air conditioning was not on in his room, no matter how hot it got. But anyhow, we were there, and there was a fire there in the terrace. And we were talking about service to the Lord, and I made the analogy. I said, and I had an example of Obadiah, zealous, just zealous. Let's go get him. And almost to the point of overbearing. I mean, that's the guy I have to put the reins on and say, whoa, mule, a little bit. Give people a chance to breathe, you know. And I said, there's the fire, and that which catches your eye is that orange and the sparks and so forth. But that's not what's fueling that fire. It's that blue color underneath. That's where the heat is. You want to get something burned, you can play around with the flames. But you want to get something melted, you put it in that blue area. And I said, that's zeal. That's zeal. That's that fervency. And that's what this word means. My zeal, fervency. I'm going to give a couple examples of it in conjunction with the whole verse itself. Because mine enemies have forgotten thy words, my zeal hath consumed me. You've heard of fire in the belly? Okay, that's kind of what we're talking about. Look in the Gospel of John, chapter 2. The Gospel of John. John chapter 2. Sometimes in the Gospels, we forget that he was every whit deity. He was the holy God incarnate. And we come to the Jews' Passover, not the Lord's Passover, the Jews' Passover, what they'd made it into. And notice in John chapter 2, verse 13, and the Jews' Passover was at hand. And Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and the changers of money sitting. Wait a minute. Now, we've studied the Passover, right? Pretty thorough. What are we doing with cash registers here? What are we doing with accountants and tables and money? And as you know, they had a little circular profit machine going on here. See, you and I would bring our lamb, and they'd say, oh, there's a blemish. Nope, can't use that lamb, put him in the back. Here's our lamb, and if you'll pay for this lamb, you can have the Passover. Sure enough, they made merchandise out of the Passover. Now, notice, if you will, please. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, there's no discussion here. There's no confrontation. He just goes over and makes a whip. And notice, he drove them all out of the temple. He hasn't said a word yet. Not yet. So this would be almost like a very sudden attack. Out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money and overthrew the tables. He's making a real mess here. And he said unto them that sold doves. Now he's ready to talk to them. These things, take these things from here, and make not my Father's house an house of what? They turned that thing into a regular bank. That house in Jerusalem was the place where he was to keep his name. Remember? And his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. Then answered the Jews and said unto him, what sign showest thou unto us, seeing thou doest these things? And Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Now, they used this against him later, as if he wanted to destroy Herod's temple. And that's not the temple he was talking about. When they demanded a sign, he pointed toward his resurrection. Then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building, wilt thou raise it up in 3 days? But he spoke of the temple of his body. This idea of the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. Now turn to the book of Psalms, chapter 69. Psalms, chapter 69. In verse 9, this is a messianic psalm. There's several quotes here in reference to the crucifixion and the ministry of Christ. And this is one of them. Look in chapter 69, verse 9. For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up, and the reproaches of those who reproach thee are fallen upon me. That's where this came from. The zeal of thine house. Let's look at this in reference to, say, a follower of God in faith. Look at the book of Numbers, chapter 25. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Numbers chapter 25. The doctrine of Balaam. Oh boy, how that got into Israel, and it caused apostasy with God. And look in chapter 25, verse 1, and Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods. And the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. And Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people, and hang them up before the Lord against the sun, and the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. And Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay ye every one his man that were joined unto Baal Peor. And behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought unto his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses, in the sight of the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Are you kidding me? Brought her right there. That's where you kind of, hey, what are you thinking, right? No, I just hit start, I think. Okay, she's right on it. Well, that was quick, Millie. You're getting quicker at this by the minute. Now notice in verse 6, and behold, now verse 7. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it. I'm in Numbers 25 still, and I'm in verse 7. And he rose up from among the congregation, took a javelin in his hand, and went after the man of Israel into the tent, and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her abdomen. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. And those that died in the plague were 24,000. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, hath turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them. And I consumed not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say, Behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and he shall have it, and his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God, and made an atonement for the children of Israel. Okay. That's the idea of zealous. Zeal. I'm going to have to stop right there because we're getting close to, no, that's too bad. Well, that's a neat one to be in the middle of. So we'll look at this further and see how it would play out practically. We are those who have been redeemed that we might be a peculiar people, zealous of good works. This ought to be seen in our own lives, a fervency for God. Okay, let's end with a word of prayer, and then we'll continue our prayer meeting.